Hey everybody, welcome back. Tony again with Shinsho Yoga, and today I'm going to work on Pigeon Pose, or as it is known in Sanskrit, and I never pronounce this properly, Eka Pada Rajakapotasana. I don't use that Sanskrit in my class because I can never get that one right, so we just go with pigeon. I like to use Sanskrit, but that's a little too much. It's a mouthful. So we just go with good old Pigeon Pose. Pigeon Pose may be a favorite pose of yours. If you're a regular in yoga, it's a favorite of mine. I really enjoy it. You might find it to be a resting pose. And those of you that heard all that and say, wow, you're crazy, I understand your pain. Because when I first started with Pigeon, it was not a resting pose, and I did not enjoy it. It's kind of like cow face poses for me to this day. That one is never a favorite of mine. That's a real challenge. I'm hoping to someday to be able to look back on that just as I look back on pigeon, but not currently for shoelace or cow face pose. But Pigeon Pose. Going to get into today not only how to get into it, but modifications to using blocks and blankets. So probably going to run a little bit longer than the normal on this video, as I want to talk a little bit about what the posture does and struggles that you will have with it. Pigeon is for the outside of the hip primarily. So you're going to get into the glute back here along to the IT band along the outside, the abductor that runs along the outside of the leg here. So anywhere from glute here on down, right? So here on down there, right? So if you have tight hips, or you could have tight shoulders too that could affect this, Pigeon may be very challenging. I have some students that I really have to give a whole bunch of props to get into Pigeon. And that doesn't mean it's bad that you know, if you have to use a whole bunch of props in Pigeon, that's no good. Again, we use the props to fully access the pose. This is not a competition. This is not a ballet, right? This is yoga. Right? Yoga is very different. It's its own thing. And we do what we need to do to fully access the pose so we get the full health benefit from it. So that's why I want to demonstrate also with some props today to show you how to get into it for your body, because you may struggle with it, and I want you to be successful in your practice. I want all of my students to be successful in their practice. And if you're watching this, well, for this moment in time, you're my student, and I want you to be successful. So I, as your teacher, will do the best I can to make that happen. The importance of opening the hips has a lot to do with energy, right? So in Chinese medicine, the hips and the shoulders are known as the Qua, right? Q-U-A, Qua. And they are the largest energy gates in the body. That energy is known in different Eastern medicines by different names, depending on the background. In Indian, right, Sanskrit, it's prana. In Chinese, it's known as chi. And in Japanese, it's known as ki. Right? It's all the same thing. It is the energy that moves through your body and moves through the fascia, right? So the fascia is a layer of muscle that just comes directly underneath your skin. It's like a big, gigantic rubber band, right? That goes all around your body, goes all around the viscera, the organs, around the eyes, the heart. It's one of the largest muscles in the body because it just goes everywhere. And one of the things that we do in yoga is we manipulate the fascia, because the fascia, being like a big rubber band, right, can lose its stretchiness over its time, its elasticity. But it has also what's called plasticity. Plasticity is where the muscle rests, right? Does it rest in a lengthened state or a contracted state? In yoga, we look for a lengthened state, because a lengthened state is healthy. Right? Length in the muscle, long, it allows the energy to flow, ki, chi, prana, whatever you call it, allows everything to move through, and give with that length in the muscle gives us that flexibility. Shortened or contracted muscles are what you see in people who lift weights and bodybuilders, people who look for that short contracted muscle that has a real fast twitch on it, but you see them, they can't move, and they eventually developing health benefits. When you're young, you can sustain that. But as you get older, it's going to cause a lot of problems. We don't want the muscles like this. We want them like this. You want them long, right? So the fascia we look to manipulate in yoga. And with that, in getting that fascia open, all of the other muscle systems too, right? And the hips and the shoulders are the largest gates for that energy. So getting the hips open is very important health-wise, not only for how you walk, how you sit. Hips do everything, right? They're connected right here. Legs connect to the upper body. It's everything. But our lifestyles can often contribute to the tightness that we get in here. A Western lifestyle generally is going to close down the back of the body. A Western lifestyle we'll do a lot of sitting. Right? Many people are office workers or commuting, and the body adapts to whatever you do. So if you spend 8 hours a day at a desk, and then another hour in the morning, an hour at night commuting, is 10 hours a day of sitting, the back of the body shortens. Right? The hips are going to shorten in here, in the glutes and along the legs and the shoulders, right? And then you get hunched down, and it closes everything off. So we open that. We look to reopen all of that. How do shoulders play into that? Well, the muscles in the back are like a Z, right? So the right shoulder is connected to the left hip, left shoulder to right hip. So if you have tightness in your shoulder, you may end up with a tight hip. For me, pigeon pose is very challenging. Well, not very challenging anymore. More challenging on the left than my right. One of the reasons being is I have damage to my right shoulder. Years of martial arts practice, I had some tears. I have some limited mobility in my right side. There's usually a general tightness in there just due to scar tissue. And that pulls on this hip over here and creates a shortness. So it's more of a challenge where going this side, right, going to my right side here, because I don't have this challenge here on this side, the shoulder, it's easier to open, even though this is generally a wonkier hip for me. It has to do with the way the muscles are. Don't try to figure it out so much right now. I might have just dumped a lot of info on you. For now, just know that the body connects. We want to get the gates open. We want to work the whole body as we can, and that your struggles in a posture may not be just that part itself. There may be other areas. And that's why our yoga practice needs to be holistic, all-encompassing, right? And generally it is. We work on everything, at least how I teach my classes. We do all the little parts of the body because everything connects, right? It's not just one, right? We work everything to make sure that we can get open. So if left hip is open, got to work on right shoulder. If left hip is tight, got to work on right shoulder, etc. So, enough exposition on pigeon pose. Let's talk about getting into it. Pigeon, I'm going to show you without props initially first, and then I'm going to show you with a blanket, and then I'm going to show you with blocks. So we're going to build into it. I generally always use a blanket in my pigeon pose, right? But for today, we're going to start without it, and then I'll show you how to use that, okay? So we want to start in our pigeon pose, and I'm going to start with my right side from an all fours position. So from our all fours position, tabletop, what you're going to do, just watch for now, don't do it at home with me yet, just watch. Let's step the right foot forward. Now, depending on your hip, where your right foot is going to land, maybe it lands inside the hands or outside of the hands. Doesn't really matter, because you're going to walk that right foot over to the left-hand side of the mat. Then we're going to lay that leg down. Now, this is where the modifications come in for pigeon. Traditionally, you will see people with a 90-degree angle if you see a picture of this. It doesn't have to be. Not everyone's body works that way. Everyone accesses things differently. You just can't make up your own pigeon pose, like, oh, I'm just going to sit in a chair, and this is pigeon. Although there are some ways to mimic it in a chair, but you have to come into a pose similar to it, but there are modifications. For me, from my right side, I'm going to take a bit of an angle because I need to bring the right hip down, right? So my leg here is coming to about between a 45 to 60 degree angle. The most important part is to have this back leg long behind us. We want the top of the foot down and the leg long. Not this. You know, you don't want this leg out to the side. The leg is out to the side that way. This is not pigeon, right? And then if you can't get the back leg long behind you, this is where we're going to use some props, which I'll demonstrate in a moment. But you want that back leg long behind you. The right hip is down, and we start tall, right? Tall on our hands. Now, where you go from here is going to be up to you and your body. Maybe you stay tall. Maybe this is the best you can do, and that's fine. Maybe you can walk your forearms down, right? Maybe you can be here. Maybe a blanket. Maybe you have a block here. You take your head and you put it on the block, right? Maybe you take a soft pillow or just a soft fist and take the head down like this. Maybe you can just take the arms out and rest in the pose and breathe. And when we come out of the pose, I'm going to draw the hands back, come up tall. Now, depending on what your teacher will do, I generally like to come back to downward facing dog and open the hip up with a three-legged dog and dropping the ankle over. And if you're going to do that, you want to tuck the back toe under and then press up and back for down dog. Depends on what your teacher wants to do, but you should do some type of counter posing after pigeon. Don't just... You shouldn't really launch into something else, in my opinion. Now, if you saw that and you went, yeah, hurts, right? I get it. I absolutely get it. This is the tougher side for me, my left side, so I always use a prop on that, right? So I'm going to show you first how to use a blanket for this. And this is the most base level, and this is how I always start out for pigeon. Take your blanket, your yoga blanket, right? And you're going to fold it into my affectionately referred to as a yoga burrito, right? Like this. Fold it over this way. And you're going to take this and bring this back a third of the way back on the mat here. And I'm going to demonstrate right side first, and then I'll show you left side. Right? And we're going to start from all fours as we did before. You're going to take your right foot, step it forward, walk it across to the opposite side, lay the leg down. Now, you're going to adjust the leg just as you did before, but now you're going to do an angle the blanket. So you're going to take one half of the blanket and angle it and place it over your front ankle. The other half comes under the hip here. So it's coming over my right ankle, under my right hip. Right? This provides me enough height that I can square off, right? Because you want to be squared here. You don't want to be this way, right? Or this way. Right? You want to be square. And then from here, the same folding forward. Now, in this posture, if you get to a point where you don't need the blanket anymore, you just lift the hip, slide it out. Breathe. Now, let's say, well, before I show you the block, let me demonstrate opposite side so you can see from this angle here, right, what it looks like. My left side is my more challenging side. Again, one side goes over the ankle, the other side comes under the hip, so that my hip rests, my glute here, my butt, rests on the one side, the other side's over the ankle, back leg long. Right? Left side is tighter for me, so I'm pushing a little bit this way, but I can still come down to a certain amount. I just often use a block on this side to rest my head. And then when you want to come out of this, you come up and again, slide the blanket out. And again, I like to counter pose at a minimum, down dog. So, you've done it with the blanket, but it's still not enough height, right? You're still hovering around. Well, you're going to have to do it a little differently with the blanket then. or blanket and a block. I have one student, I'll stack a blanket and two blocks in a blanket for her. Just that's the way her hips are, right? So you can always take the blanket and fold it over one more. And in that case, it's going to come underneath the hip. And I'm going to demonstrate this side so you can see it a little better. So let's say that was not enough height for me, right? I come into pigeon and the blanket wasn't enough height. So I fold it and I don't worry about it coming over the ankle. I just bring the one side underneath the hip there. So it's giving me some length up and I can get that leg, back leg long. Now, let's say that is not enough for you. You can take a block in place of the blanket. Now, the block, depending on the type you use, like these cork ones, again, they offer a lot of stability, but they don't offer much in the way of comfort. So this is really awkward. So what I often like to do is take the blanket on top of the block so it's a little bit softer. And again, now my hip is here, my back leg is long, and I can be tall. And again, now I can fold, and this is easy to fold this way for the most part, but granted this much height, you're probably not going to want to bring your head all the way down because you're going to end up really pitching forward and roll off the block. So you'll probably want a second one here to have the head on. So, if you need the height, stack a block. You can use the blanket if you don't have a foam block. You got a cork one to offer some softness or as an intermediate height adjustment. Now, there's one other way to do this with a bolster. I do not have a bolster, so I can't unfortunately show you how to do it with a bolster, but I can describe it, which may or may not help you. With a bolster, so imagine this is our bolster. Again, and if you're going to yoga classes, you're probably familiar with a bolster. It's a big long pillow. It's usually about 3 feet, I would say. And it's, wide like this, very soft. Really good at putting under the knees when you come into reclined positions. Say this is the bolster, right? You take the bolster this way so that it's up high here, right? So it would be about this high and about that long. And then you're going to step forward. Again, this is a place pretending to be a bolster. It's a blanket, not a bolster. So I don't know if somebody like fast forwarded here and went, oh, I'll just do this with a blanket. This is, have a bolster. And then you lay the leg down on that. Right? And what that does is the height of the bolster, it's going to have you up about here, right? It's going to have you around here or so. And this way, it can offer you some height. And generally, you'll want the leg, the knee, in front, right? So you'll have to play with it a bit with a bolster. Right? So generally what you would do is this would be the end of the bolster here. This would have you up pretty high like this, right? And you'll be sinking on the bolster. The knee would generally be in front, but maybe depending on your body, you maybe be a little bit on it, right? That is another way to do it if you run out of props in the studio, if you're really struggling with the posture. Different ways to do it. Don't be afraid of pigeon. It's a wonderful posture. It's a wonderful hip opener. And when you learn to rest in that pose, you'll want to do it often. I really like pigeon. And my flows that I do when I do pigeon, I always incorporate Utthita Trikonasana, revolved triangle in the warm-up because it's just great to get inside and out. So, but in the end, it comes back to the same thing. Breathe. Follow your breath. As your thoughts arise, acknowledge them, allow them to pass by, return to the breath. Over and over and over again. As long as you're doing that, you're doing yoga. Some days you're Gumby, some days you're the Tin Man. It's okay. Honest effort, breathe, follow your breath. Use the props as needed. So, hope that helps you out. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the section below. I'll get back to you. So, thanks again for watching. Namaste.